As we head towards the final days of Honkai Star Rail's closed beta, which is also the final beta, we can finally put our 2 cents on if this game is worth playing, the pros and cons, and is it worth your time. After about 40 to 50 hours, we have a pretty good sense of what's what and what's good and what's bad. Hey guys, welcome on in. Kyriosyuudai here, and I just want to cover my review or my first impressions of Honkai Star Rail. I hope you guys do enjoy. I'm going to break this down based on like combat, story, gacha, events, and just touch briefly on all of them. So hit the chapters down below. And as you're watching the video, if you guys do enjoy it, hit that like and subscribe. Let's go. Okay, I think we're going to start this review in the spot that most people care about, which is the gacha system, since it is a gacha game. Now, I do think the story, the characters, and everything else is better than the gacha system. So let's go ahead and just cover the negative first, even though it's not the worst gacha system I've seen. For anyone that's played Genshin Impact, you will find this gacha system to be very familiar. You'll have a standard banner, you'll have a weapon banner, which they call light cones, which is essentially the way that you equip quote-unquote weapons, and then you will have a limited banner. Now, the rate up banners are 0.6% chance to essentially get the 5-star, a 5-star off the banner, with a 90 pity. Now that 90 pity is a lot, especially for a game that requires a lot of characters. And I mean, you need a lot of characters. Now you can power level your way through the game with just a specific set of characters, but with the way that combat works, and we'll get into that in just a second, with having to bring the correct elements into the fights to be able to break shields, you end up switching characters a lot. I ended up switching between about 10 to 11 different characters depending on what I was doing. Now, the first perk is that you do get a beginner banner, and that beginner banner does guarantee you a 5-star after about 50 pulls. Now, sadly, for all you rerollers, it takes roughly about an hour to get to here, and you should be getting about 20 free pulls on the reroll or on the pre-registration rewards, but if you don't pull it in the first 20, you still have another 30 to go. And to get those other 30 summons, you might be playing the game for about 20, 30, 40, 50 hours in order to get enough gems and tickets to be able to get that. Now, one perk I do really like is on the standard banner, you are guaranteed a 5-star one time after 300 summons. Now, you're not really going to be summoning on the standard banner except for when you get actual tickets to summon off that. And you can get those from simulated missions, or what they call simulated universe, which is kind of like bygones. And there's a couple other ways to get those tickets every week to progress that, but it's not going to be very quickly because you're going to be mainly rolling on the limited banners, and the limiteds in this game are in. Now, we did have a chance to play as Sealy or Sela, or however you pronounce her name, and then Jingyan, which are both very amazing limited characters, and honestly they're both great. If you get either of those, you're going to be off to the races, and the limited characters are just way better than the standard characters. But that's not to say that the standard characters are bad. There's a lot of good ones there too. You have Himiko, you've got Bronya, you've got a bunch of different characters. Roughly about the gacha system, the gems that you get seem relatively low based on the dailies and weeklies and events you get. Now, we'll do a complete deep dive of that later, but as of right now, you're not going to be summoning very often, and sometimes you're going to have to use your gems for getting some energy if you want to progress the story faster in the first couple of weeks, and we'll talk about that in more detail. So if I was to rate the gacha system, it would honestly be like maybe a 6 out of 10. I just don't think they give you enough free summons in the beginning. You should be able to clear out that beginning banner almost immediately and start the game with a 5-star like an hour in. It would make life so much better than having to go 50 summons into that beginner banner. But that's just me personally. And I would have liked to have seen, with the amount of 4 stars and 5 stars that you need, I would have liked to have seen them actually bring that pity down to maybe like 70 or something like that. But so that's my rating on the gacha system. Let's go ahead and head on over to combat. The combat system, this is pretty basic, and actually I really enjoy the basicness of this game, mainly because you can play this game on your phone, and if you're sitting on the couch watching some anime or anything like that, it's an easy game to play through, and the autoing is pretty decent as well. The basics of attacking is you essentially have 3 abilities. You have your basic ability on Q, you have your skill ability, which takes points in the bottom right hand corner. So sometimes you have to use basic abilities to build up points, and then sometimes use skills to build down points. and you have that on your E, and then you have your ultimate ability, which is really nice because you can weave that in anywhere. You can even weave it in when it's not your turn. This is especially good for healers. When your team takes a lot of AoE damage, it's not your healer's turn. You can hit that ultimate out of turn and get some burst healing. Now, the elemental system is pretty basic in my opinion. Essentially, you bring the character into the elemental weakness of that enemy. If they're weak to ice, you just bring ice in. If they're weak to fire, you bring fire in. There's no elemental synergy or reactions or anything like that. It's essentially break shield, take down the enemy, rinse and repeat. Now, sometimes some of the battles are pretty hard because you're outnumbered. Sometimes they'll put like 5 enemies against 1, and this game is pretty quick to overwhelm you. But there's ways around that as well. You can level up your characters, and you can use some food before hard fights in order to get an additional buff. Now, the speed up in auto is good, and it's great for burning energy. So if you have 180 energy and you just need to go get some resources or some XP books or anything like that, you can borrow a friend, go into there, hit the auto, hit the double speed, which actually feels like triple speed in my opinion, and then just go ahead and burn through it. Now, the only thing I would like to see them do is that the speed up system is a little too fast at time. It's okay for when you're burning energy, but when you're trying to do double speed in story missions, when you don't want to go basic speed, but you don't also want to go triple speed, they should have a 1.5 times speed setting where it goes a little bit faster, but you can still, pick and choose your abilities and your ultimates before as you're fighting. Now, given the simplicity of the combat, but I actually really enjoy it, and I enjoy turn-based games, I'm going to give this combat an 8 out of 10. I think they could have done a little bit more in depth, maybe like some items or something like that, or anything to cause maybe some synergies with the way your characters are put together, or I feel like they could have done just a little bit more, but overall it's fun and it's easy, and you can once again sit on the couch and enjoy the combat. All right, that brings us into story, and the story in this game is absolutely amazing. Now, the way that the story started off was I was not that enticed by it until I got to about an hour to 2 hours in, when you hit the first kind of boss battle and then you get to the first world, when the story really starts to open up and you start meeting a lot of different characters, and everything is voice acted, or at least the main story, everything is voice acted, which is such a great touch. And the other thing I do really enjoy is that the voice acting actually matches the mouth movement in English or Japanese or any language you're playing in.
Impressive evacuation work. Did Herta organize it herself?
According to the access history, she hasn't logged in here for over 6 months. The evacuation was directed by the acting lead researcher, a girl named Asta.
That is such a great touch. There's a lot of times in some previous games like Genshin Impact and a few other gacha games where the mouth movements do not match what the character is saying, and that's always been very weird to me, that you don't take the time to match those up. But in Honkai they do, and that's absolutely amazing. And I'm in story-wise, I mean, it took me about 20 hours to get through the first world. We probably could have speedrun that a little bit faster, but we sat and we enjoyed the story, and the story was great. There was character progression, there was world building, there was synergy, there was funny times, there were sad times, and it was just great. I enjoyed it. If I was to give any feedback here, some of the side quests could also be voice acted, in my opinion, depending on how big the side quest is. If I was to give the story a rating, it would be 10 out of 10, in my opinion, as of right now. But we didn't get to experience, second, third, fourth, fifth world, how many worlds they may have. Now, that story may go up or may go down depending on the progression of the way they take the story. All right, we have 2 more points to really touch on, and the first one is being the UI. Now, the UI is really stripped out of Genshin Impact. Like this UI is one-to-one Genshin Impact. Now, from what I understand, the UI in previous iterations of the beta and the alpha, the UI was very confusing and very hard to work with. So I think what they did is they brought the Genshin Impact team in and said, hey, we need to redo this UI. And they were like, hey, we already have a UI, slap, 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 paste, 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 done, 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 right? And that's not a bad thing. The UI is good. It's easy. It's familiar. It's easy to navigate. It's easy to find where you need to upgrade. Go find your talents. go find your light cones, go find your characters, level them up. Now, the only thing I would say is kind of confusing is the way that they do talents is a lot more confusing than previous games or gacha games. But I do like seeing a big talent tree, but it just means there's a lot more grind because you have to level up a bunch of different talents and get a lot of unique resources, which is not a bad thing. Maybe it's not a good thing either as we progress later and you get a lot more limited characters depending on how fast we can farm that, and we won't know that until we get into the actual game. All right, finally that brings us on to our last point, which are events. And we were only able to experience 1 to 2 events in Honkai Star Rail. Now there's a new event that's coming out at the time of making this video, so I won't be able to cover that, but the one event we did get in the beginning was extremely lackluster. Essentially, you just zone into a single mission. They say, hey, you have to complete it within 2 turns. If you can do it, you get all the resources. If you can't do it, you don't get all the resources. And they got to figure out a way to do more. And the only thing I can think of is they need to take their roguelike system where you can have this progression and you go through levels and you find different materials and stuff like that. That's the only way I can see events being pretty good. And it's not to say low-key events are bad, but they can't be the highlight of your events. They have to be kind of like semi-events, and then you have big events. So that's what I'm hoping out of the game. But since we were not able to experience that, and the events were, once again, it takes you about 15 seconds to complete it, I swear. It just was not good in my book. So as of right now, from what I understand, the events are probably a 6 out of 10. But they may be better, they may be worse depending on release. All right, guys, that's all I really got. I tried to keep this very short and sweet, give you guys my feedback. Now, if I was to add up all those numbers, and I can't even remember what numbers I gave everything, overall, is this game worth playing? Absolutely. Now, if you don't like turn-based games, probably not for you. Go ahead and dip out. I totally get that. But is this a great game with a great story, and it's free technically? Yes. Now, is it going to be very grindy? I think it's going to be extremely grindy. But that's not per se a bad thing, especially since it's a very easy game to, once again, play while watching some anime. If you guys do like the video, once again, hit that like and subscribe. It helps us grow the channel, and you can support the channel essentially for free. I do appreciate you. I'll see you on the next video, and fist bump from me to you.